What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel and some more bolt action coverage here. So we're picking back up on our series of scenario reviews, getting now into the latter half of those found in the main rulebook, so the attacker-defender scenarios. And today we're going to be taking a look at envelopment. And this one is nice enough to give us a map as well. So again, attacker-defender, and we clearly see the defender zone there. So we'll get into the details here. So an enemy pocket of resistance is to be engaged and pinned in place by a portion of your force, while the rest make their way around the enemy position to surround them and isolate them from their supply chain. Sure. Will players roll a die? The higher is going to be the one who chooses whether they want to be the attacker or defender. The defender picks a side of the table and sets up at least half their units in that area. We see the map, of course. So these units may use the hidden setup rules, so it gives you a little bit of a buff there as the defender. Units that are not set up to start with are left in reserve. The attacker's units are not set up on the table at the start of the game. The attacker must nominate at least half of their force, basically to be the first wave, and this can be the whole army if you so desire, and any units not in the first wave are also left in reserve. Reserves are not allowed to outflank in this scenario. So, the attacker must try to move as many of his units onto or into the defender setup zone or off the opposing sides of the table edge. The defender must try and stop him. Note that in this scenario, attacking units are allowed to deliberately move off the table. This one does include a preparatory bombardment as well, so the attacker rolls a die on a 2+, a bombardment strikes the enemy positions, and on a result of 1, the barrage just fails to materialize, but you have your orders and you just still have to go forward with the attack, of course. So turn 1, the battle begins, so the attacker must move his entire first wave onto the table. These units can enter the table from any point on the attacker's table edge and must be given a run or advance to get onto the table. Note that they don't have to take any order test for this, it's just they have to essentially walk onto the table. So that leads to some interesting choices here. Essentially, if you're the attacker, do you go super aggressive and just, have your whole army in the first wave and hope to just sort of rush through and break through the opponent? Or do you play it a little bit more cautiously and see where you might be able to force an opening and then start bringing on your reserves to sort of help exploit that gap? Defender, of course, similar ideas here. So, you do have your reserves and hopefully those will arrive in time. So you definitely need to be careful of choosing what you choose to start your forces with and how those are deployed properly. That being said, the preparatory bombardment certainly can suck, especially when it does hit, and especially if the opponent is rolling well on those, you can start the game severely crippled. And having played this one many a times, sometimes that unfortunately does happen, and this can lead to some games where it's almost a foregone conclusion as to who's going to win, especially if some of your units really get pins on them that you just don't get to resolve or move early, and especially if the opponent's very aggressive and then gets on top of you too. So sometimes that unfortunately does happen. Duration of the game here, so basically goes through 6 on turn 6. On a 1, 2, or 3, the game ends. 4, 5, or 6, you do get one more turn. Ideally, if you're the defender, you kind of want the game to end, right? So hopefully that extra turn doesn't materialize. Now, victory conditions here. So at the end of the game, calculate which side has won by adding up victory points as following here. If one side scores at least 2 more, then they win. Otherwise, it is a draw. So the attacker gets 1 point for every enemy unit destroyed. He also gets 2 points for each of his own units that are inside the defender's setup area, even if only partially. So, those last minute, if you have some of the last units to activate as the attacker and you can just run into their zone, at least partially, that's just a quick way to score points. And then you get 3 points for each of your units that actually do make it off the table. So cool if it happens, but ideally, you want to keep yours around for a little bit to help whittle down the enemy, because then you can just, sit comfortably in their defending zone if you make it that far anyway. And, just, again, make it much more easier for other units to get there as well. But that being said, just depending on the activation order in the last turn and all that, you can then just choose to walk off and score those extra points. However, the defender just scores a flat 2 for each enemy unit destroyed, and it's going to be certainly an uphill battle for the defender, so you're going to have to play very smart. He can't really afford any overly aggressive or risky moves, just because, again, your units are very, very precious for you here. So it's not so much about you losing them, but it's just that many more things that you have that won't be able to stop the enemy from getting into your zone and possibly off the board. So, so you just have to be super, super cautious there. So, you're going to want to mitigate enemy sightlines and just, again, make some of the best possible plays possible. And then, of course, hope your reserves show up to stem the tide. So you really do want to know where that setup zone is, and basically, any enemy unit that does make it to that, you have to just focus them down as fast as possible, just because, again, you don't want them scoring at the end of the game. So that wraps up the scenario here, guys. So Envelopment is a fun one, but like I said, sometimes that Preparatory Bombardment can make it a little bit swingy and lead to some maybe not as fun games. So some things that, of course, spice this game up, as we've talked about earlier in the series. So, you throw in some other conditions like night fighting, weather, and other things like that. Can make for some really interesting games. You could also mess around with the deployment zone a little bit, and maybe some different like table sizes and all that can make it pretty fun. So that being said, let us know in the comments, guys, as always, what your experiences have been, any fun moments, whether it's the attacker or defender, or things you'd change on the scenario. So hit us up in the comments there, guys. Like and subscribe as always. Check out the description and head over to Warlord there if you do want to support the channel. So anything you guys pick up while following that link helps support us, and we do appreciate everybody who's been doing that. So we will see you in the next one. Take care.